Hello everyone, this is Judah. This will be my first video on this channel, and I do want to make this kind of a video about two things. My worldview and something that you probably won't see much, and an argument for God. Um, my worldview is I'm agnostic atheist, meaning that I don't know, hence agnostic. And number two, that I think that there is no personal God, okay? By atheist, most people assume that most atheists or a lot of atheists probably do say that they don't think that there's any God at all, but by a personal God, I mean obviously the Christian God, um, I don't know, the Muslim God, every God that kind of has something to do with reality, and like is actually like calling the shots and doing miracles and um, performing stuff into people's lives. I think that the evidence for that is very lackluster. Now, I would say I'm still agnostic on this. There could be, but I think that the evidence is very bad. Um, yeah, I mean that's just my worldview. Don't if anyone's watching this that is my relative or don't take this like I don't know what to say, but anyways, an argument for God that I've been thinking about. The abundance of suffering. Now wait, the problem of evil is is obviously like probably one of, if not the biggest logical contradiction in personal gods, right? Because especially, well, it's mostly just omni gods, right? Omni powerful or all powerful, all loving, right? Those two kind of contradict each other with the reality that we see today, right? That's just a fact. There's ways that Christians try to address this, but it it's kind of unavoidable and I don't know. But okay, assuming, right? This is what's his name? Well, anyways, the philosophy of if an all-loving God does exist, then the suffering that exists here has to have an all-loving reason, right? Assuming that he does actually exist. So, a way that I can put or say this is if X is true and God can't contradict his all-loving nature, then B has to be true too, right? Because if an all-loving God does exist, then the suffering that we see here on earth has to be good because he exists, right? Now, I think that that's kind of a poor argument. That's not the argument that I'm bringing up today. But I want to make an argument that the abundance of suffering, it almost points towards the fact that maybe it does have some greater value that we can't really see. And wait, this is a really bad point, and I know that a lot of Christians use this, but think about it, okay? Everyone, most people have their lowest moment. I would say almost like 60-70% have almost like took their own life. It's gotten that bad, like half of the people have gotten to their low where they're thinking about that. And there's two hypotheses, okay? Number one, there's an evil God, right? Assuming that there's a God exists, and he in or I just can't comprehend it. I guess I gotta say that, but in from what I've observed, there's an evil God, and he just takes pleasure in human suffering, or there really is an all-loving God, and that somehow all of this seemingly unnecessary suffering has some greater end. However unlikely, however against the odds, it has to be the case. And I think that there's so much suffering that it kind of points more towards the good God than the bad God. Because if it truly was a bad God, then he would just do everything in his power to be evil, right? Now, if it was a good God, then he would allow, assuming that suffering did have some necessary purpose, if there was a good God, he would allow the suffering for whatever reason, but then he would also bring good in the lives of people too, right? Because think about that. If a good God did exist, or he's just not all powerful, all loving, but I'm kind of just going towards that side, because maybe there's a God, right? And he created the universe and he was like, guys, I'm sorry that the world is how it is, but I tried the best I could, evolution and this was just the best way I could do it, and he's not all powerful, he's not all loving, and maybe this is just creation, something like that. And then in that case, it wouldn't be either. But assuming that the alternative hypotheses are a God that created us for evil, or an omni-god who somehow sees the value in this. And no matter how unlikely it may be, or however bad that might sound, or might entail bad things, because everyone has so much suffering, I don't know why, but I feel like that's an argument in and of itself for a god. Because assuming that we actually didn't have any natural intrinsic value and everything was an accident, then I guess the suffering would make sense. But for some reason, it doesn't really click in my mind that there would be so much. Like, surely we would have found a way to suffer less. You know what I mean? Or maybe we will in thousands of years. But I don't know. I think that it's interesting that there's so much suffering. You know? I think a counter argument to myself would be that people suffered more back then than they do now, and we're kind of progressing still, and the human species is still young. But I don't know. I think that that's something to think about. And yeah, that'll be my first video on this channel. My next video will probably be more on the agnostic atheist side, talking about some controversial stuff. But yeah, I think that was my first video on this channel, explaining my worldview and an argument for God.